Fred Lee, KGGF news chief in Coffeyville, Kansas, took more than a year off to see what it was like to be a cop, he saw. He's back at KGGF.
KGGF's Fred Lee tells me Dr. Moore paid off. Dr. R.F. Moore of Caney, Kansas. He'd made a bet with Gina Barnett that she'd never be able to lose 100 pounds, and she lost 110. So Dr. Moore kept his part of the wager, went to the intersection of 4th and Spring, and despite a downpour, did a headstand right out in the street.
Radio station KGGF in Coffeyville, Kansas tells us about some unidentified flying objects being sighted near Coffeyville and over in Oklahoma. Patrolman Dennis Steele chased one at speeds at 85 miles an hour. Never did catch up, but there's no doubt in his mind it was a UFO.
Now, for what it's worth, Department, here's from Independence, Kansas. Juanita Black worked in the Elks Club. Ray Verge worked at the nearby laundry and dry cleaners. And he'd be leaving work just as she was coming to work, so they met on the sidewalk outside. And they met there often thereafter. In fact, for 14 months, most of their courtship was on that North 8th Street sidewalk. And when they decided to marry, both thought, and the merchants along the area thought, the ceremony should be there, where they'd met, where they'd courted. Well, sir, it was. But now I want to tell you, March can be unpredictable in Kansas. Nonetheless, Juanita and Ray's friends came from Coffeyville and Caney, from Cherryvale, from Independence, up from Bartlesville and Tulsa, and rural routes in between. And though the wind was blowing and it was 18 above zero, and there was snow and slush everywhere, the crowd overflowed the sidewalk, so the ceremony took place on a red carpet right smack in the middle of Laurel and 8th Streets. Judge Ken David, who performed the ceremony, says it was a fascinating experience. A fascinating experience. Judge, you have a cold? Paul Harvey. Good day.
Good morning, this is DateLine 69, and you're listening to the program Morning People. We have with us a man on the program this morning who is no stranger to KGGF radio listeners and...
American.
Would you say that again? Good morning, Paul Harvey.
Fred, it's a delight to be with you, and I'm quite excited about this new formula of yours. The whole industry is kind of watching to see what comes of your morning of news.
You're kidding, of course.
No, I'm not kidding. All of us are looking for a proper means of enlightening people without boring them, and maybe you found it.
Well, we hope so. I think possibly, Paul, our program might be tailored somewhat to yours because your delivery is entertaining as well as informative, and we hope we can do the same thing here.
I'm flattered, Fred, that you should make the comparison.
Paul, we want to talk a little bit about you, the person Paul Harvey, that people don't normally hear that side of you. A little bit about your background. I understand you started in this area in broadcasting.
Yes, I grew up in Tulsa, though sometimes my wife suspects that I haven't grown up yet. And first broadcast when I was 14 on KVOO in the old days when it was in the Phil Tower there. So, though my roots are still very much in Oklahoma, the last third of a century we've been in the city of Chicago.
Paul, what about your day there? I know from talking with you occasionally that you're extremely busy. What time does your day start?
I get up at 4, Fred, and I'm at my desk before 5, Chicago time. Start preparing the first broadcast, and after that one, the noon broadcast. After that, I have a newspaper column to prepare and a TV commentary to prepare. And then about 2 or 3 days a week, I'm flying somewhere for a speaking engagement. Often getting back into Chicago well after midnight, barely in time to shave and shower and go to work again. It sounds like a punishing schedule until one realizes that with some of us, the vocation and the avocation are the same thing. So I've looked at from another point of view. I've probably never really worked a day in my life.
Paul, what about the time that you do get off? What do you manage to do and like the most?
I like golf. Young Paul and I have a basement workshop which has been neglected recent weeks. I find these things very therapeutic. But quite frankly, I've never found anything that I prefer doing to what appears to others to be work. I really see no sense in forcing myself to sit on a creek bank drowning worms if I'd rather be sitting at that typewriter painting pictures. Now, in deference to the family, once in a while, it's obligatory that I get away for a regular vacation. Then we usually go to our Missouri Ozarks farm and vegetate for a few days.
Paul, I know a lot of people have asked me questions. They say, does Paul Harvey write his own material? Do you do all of that?
Yes, Fred, I pound every word into a typewriter myself. That's 11 broadcasts a week and 3 newspaper columns a week and 5 TV commentaries a week, plus whatever is involved in the preparation of the speeches. I've sometimes envied those fellows who can walk in at the last minute and read what somebody else wrote, but it would be a little late for me to try to do it differently now. And also, you know, when you're dealing with a matter of personal opinion, when you're willing to sink or swim on that opinion, you want to be real sure it's your own. At least I do. As you know, most of our broadcasts these days, and certainly our major market telecasts, are corporate efforts, the things that Cronkite has a whole bunch of people handing him things to say. And I wouldn't be comfortable in that sort of a situation. I'm too fiercely independent for that, I guess.
Paul, another question that I've had people ask me is, all
right.
right.
Now, Fred, though as I say, I bang every word into a typewriter myself, Angel over the years has been immensely helpful in researching different subjects. She has a fine faculty for sensing trends, for knowing what things might be of interest to what people. And also, these city desks and news desks, even like your own, as you know, over the years, recognizing the sort of salt and pepper that Paul Harvey likes to use to season the news, things that don't necessarily merit the trunk wires of AP and UPI, but are still of general interest, if not earth-shaking importance. Those many stringers around the country over the years have sent in to me by telephone and telegraph each morning some of those so-called human interest stories that you and I enjoy using. So I'm in your debt too.
Well, thank you, Paul. And that was my next question. People say, gee, how does he get all that information that we don't hear about in other sources? And I guess that's the key, is just people being in contact with you daily.
Yes, and of course that's one of the reasons for having it gotten so early in the morning. The phone calls, the telephone, and telegraph keeps us busy sorting those.
Well, I don't know how you feel about it, but that's almost exactly the same time I get up. It takes me probably 7 minutes to get to work in the morning, where it probably takes you probably a half hour or better.
I envy you that proximity.
But the comment I was going to make, Paul, is, to me, I don't know how you feel about it, but that's the prettiest time of the day.
Fred, I agree, and especially since my skyscraper window here in Chicago faces the sunrise, I get a big lift when the day is not too gray, just to watch the day awake and, I don't know, awakening to birdsong is real therapy, isn't it?
It is for me, and Paul, your philosophy in news, your delivery, trying to put across the facts and also be entertaining, do you think this is a trend that the country is going through, or is it a unique situation?
I don't know how to answer that, Fred. I frankly am so preoccupied with grinding out my own product that I don't pay a lot of attention to what others are doing. I'm told that there has been an effort by a lot of local newsrooms around the country recently to kind of lap it up. I'm sorry about that. I think that if it's done overtly, tends to prostitute journalism. But I just don't want to presume to prescribe for others. I want to do it my way as long as that's acceptable and let others find theirs. When I started out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I was a great imitator. I guess we all are when we're 14, but I used to come on KVOO, and I bet some of your listeners in Coffeyville will remember. I'd sound so much like the fellow who just signed off, whether it was Graham McNamee or Ted Husing or H.V. Kaltenborn. I'd sound so much like him that you couldn't tell where he finished and I began. Until one day a rude, ruthless, but talented program director took me aside and explained that as long as Paul Harvey was trying to sound like somebody else, the best he could ever hope to be was second best. And that the only thing he could possibly do better than anybody was to be Paul Harvey. And I've been from that day to this trying to figure out what it is that Paul Harvey sounds like.
Well, Paul, we're about out of time here today. We know that we have a lot of Tulsa listeners on KGGF that are listening to you this morning, and I know that it's good to hear the personal side of Paul Harvey rather than your normally broadcast, which we hear every day.
Fred, he was Paul Harvey Aurant, A-U-R-A-N-D-T, when he lived in Tulsa. I haven't used that last French Huguenot name for 35 years because nobody could spell it. But those people, including my own dear sister in Bartlesville and others, will be delighted to know that young Paul, now a promising concert pianist who is getting excellent reviews all over the country, has reverted to using the Aurant name. He wants to identify himself as somebody other than just Paul Harvey's son. And so I'm very proud of him.
Well, Paul, when you get close to this area, we owe you about a 16-ounce steak. Say hello to Jim Page and all the fellas out there, too, for me. I've had such a wonderful association with Coffeyville over the years. We will, and I've always wanted to say to you, Paul Harvey, good day.
Uh-oh. Good day.
Thank you. We've been visiting with Paul Harvey today on the program Morning People.